All right, Stefan, let's go to this big Champions League game. Let's finish up the podcast with that. I think it's fascinating. I think it's too early. I wish I would have seen it a little bit later. Round of 16, Bayern against Leverkusen. Quarterfinals would have been fun. It's the first time two German teams play each other in the Champions League since that 2013 final at Wembley between Bayern and Dortmund. We came really close last year, right? That we had Bayern and Dortmund again at Wembley. We had a German duel in the Champions League before that twice. In 97, 98, Dortmund played Bayern in the quarterfinals and went through 1-0 on aggregate. Stefan Chapuisat scored the winner then. Now I feel really old. And 1 year after that, it was Bayern against Kaiserslautern, which Bayern won 2-0 at home and then 4-0 in Kaiserslautern. So those are the three previous German duels in the Champions League. There's of course some you can go further back, right? Like if you go to UEFA Cup, there's been a German final in the UEFA Cup as well. There have been I think there's been 1 year where all four teams in the Europa League were German teams. Then we had East German, West German duels and all that sort of stuff. But in the Champions League, this is number 4. I'm really looking forward to it in some ways, even though it's too early, because I think for both these teams, it really determines actually who's the best team in Germany, right? Because when you go by this year, Bayern and Leverkusen aren't that far apart. Leverkusen really threw the title away in the first half of the season, didn't they? And Leverkusen held Bayern to 2 draws. Should have probably won the game at home. Bayern should have won their game at home. Leverkusen should have probably won their game at home. But then also Leverkusen beat Bayern in the German Cup. So on balance right now, is it a best of 7 series? No, I guess a best of 5 series that we now kick out of this. It's a best of 5 series. Leverkusen are leading the best of 5 series if we're calling it that.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. I think it's really interesting the first leg's in Munich, and I suspect we'll probably see a similar setup to how Leverkusen played in that league game at the Allianz Arena, where they sat very defensively for the most part. And, they stunk the place out and they left with a point and they were more than happy with that. And then I think Alonso will probably be quite happy to go back to the Bayern Arena and then obviously try and win the tie there. Because as you said, in that most recent game, which was in Leverkusen, Leverkusen should have won that game 3 or 4-0 or 3-4-1 or whatever. They dominated it. And as you said, these two teams are so close to each other right now that their kind of head-to-heads in the league this season have more or less, well, they have literally cancelled each other, even performance-wise. Bayern were dominant at home, then Leverkusen were dominant at home, and both teams really kind of ceded control of those games when they went to the opposing stadiums. So it shows a huge amount of respect that both these teams have for each other. It shows a huge amount of respect both these head coaches have for each other. And it'll be interesting to see. The only thing I think that's maybe a little different here is that I just think that Leverkusen want this so much. They've probably in their heart of hearts already accepted the league title's gone, and they'll know that the Champions League is all or nothing now. To borrow a phrase from a popular Formula One podcast show on Netflix, I think that's always been the case. I think the goal for this season was for Alonso and that team to prove what they're capable of in the Champions League this year. And I suspect that, Alonso will be spending this entire week preparing to really try and get the better of Bayern. Because obviously if they can go there and get a result in Munich, then it turns the tie on its head. And Munich then have to go and face Leverkusen, and Leverkusen can sit deep and counter-attack in the second half. In the second leg and kind of pick them off. And, I must admit, I think that aspect of it, so that's kind of almost like this kind of like the mental side of it all, or the kind of the psychological aspect of it all, I think plays in Leverkusen's favour. I think I'd also probably say that just in general, Bayern have typically disappointed in big games this season. Company's done a tremendous job of getting this team to where they are in the Bundesliga. They're obviously going to walk to the league title, and that was his job for this season, and no one can take that away from him. I saw Boris Becker getting very animated on Twitter this week about it because Jamie Carragher had the audacity to say the company had to win the Champions League or challenge for the Champions League this season. I think that's a whole other discussion. I'm probably leaning more towards Jamie Carragher's point of view on that one, to be honest. But I think the point is Boris Becker was saying was that even just winning the league this year is a huge achievement for Bayern after what happened last season. And that's obviously first and foremost company's main job. But we've seen time and time again in the Champions League, the tactics that he's used in the Bundesliga haven't translated well over against the likes of Aston Villa, against the likes of Barcelona, PSG, even against Celtic, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think they were comfortable at all in that tie, even though, their budget absolutely dwarfs Celtic's. I think we discussed at the time that Manuel Neuer makes more than like 2/3 of that Celtic squad. So, they were playing minnows by all stretch, by every definition, and they struggled in that one. So I think it will take a monumental performance from Bayern to beat Leverkusen over these two games, because we have, and I say monumental because we haven't seen that from Bayern under company yet, if that makes sense. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's the perfect opportunity to do that because they obviously get through to the next round of the Champions League. But they unquestionably prove that they have overcome these domestic challengers both in Europe and the Bundesliga. So it's a perfect stage for them to kind of step up and do that. But I think it'd be something that we haven't quite seen from company, and they'll have to kind of maybe prove that they can make that step up to take that Bundesliga form to the Champions League against the Leverkusen team that they have struggled against this season. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, who do you think are favourites for this tie? Because I guess the way I'm talking about it, I think Leverkusen are favourites for it.
Well, I mean, Leverkusen have had Bayern's number, and I think Alonso hasn't lost to Bayern Munich yet, right? If I'm correct. Yeah, no, he's undefeated against Bayern Munich since he's taken the job, right? Because I think in that first year they beat Bayern Munich as well. In fact, I think that was the game that cost Nagelsmann his job.
I can tell you in a minute because I'm on this very good website called Transfermarkt.
That has all the data.
It has all the data.
I'm pretty sure it was the 3-2 win by Bayer Leverkusen that cost Julian Nagelsmann his job.
The last time that Bayern Munich beat Leverkusen was the 30th of October 2022, I think.
Yep. And then Zione got fired, and
Alonso
came in.
Yep, and Nagelsmann was in charge, yep.
And then Alonso beat Bayern Munich in the return, and that cost Nagelsmann his job. Well, that and the fact he went on a ski holiday, but that's a different story for a podcast that we did at the time. Bayern players and coaches should never go on ski holidays. There's a story here. But so, to answer your question, if you are undefeated against Bayern Munich, then I would say that you are the favorite to win this tie. You have had Bayern Munich's number for the better part of 3 years now. You've consistently beaten them across several competitions because they beat them also in the cup, right? In a must-win game. They don't need to beat them in Munich. In this case, a draw will probably more than suit them because you can go all the way in Leverkusen to get the job done. So a lot of Bayern fans that are listening to this podcast will not like it, but if you go based on past results, and I include the 3 results that we had this year, I would say it is as close to 50-50 as you can make it, but I would give the slight edge to Leverkusen.
Yeah. I mean, it will be a game that unquestionably defines Leverkusen's season. I think that's the crucial thing as well. If they win this game, everyone will say, wow, they've still got Bayern's number. They're still the best team in Germany, even though they haven't won the Bundesliga. And then they can go on and, lose to Barcelona in the semi-finals or something, and people will still say, wow, Xabi Alonso's done such a good job there. If they get thumped off Bayern Munich in this game, and then Bayern obviously go on and win the league title as well, then people will say, maybe the Alonso bubble has burst. And I know neither of those situations are fair on either team, but that's just the way football is.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually speaking to one of our colleagues this week about it, who's English and covers the Premier League, and he was saying, yeah, if Leverkusen win that game, everyone's going to say Leverkusen are better than Bayern because people outside of Germany don't care about the Bundesliga; they care about the Champions League, and that's where you prove yourself.
But that would be true too if you would see a people in Germany, for example, the other way around, don't care
Of course,
about the,
of course,
you know,
of
I
course.
mean, just to put it in perspective, like when Chelsea beat Man City in the Champions League final, they were all
Yeah.
the talk, even though Man City had just walked to the Premier League title by like, what, 20 point difference? But it was that one game that defined the entire season. And I think the same is true here. And I would actually go so far and say it's not just outside of Germany, be inside of Germany too. They were like, oh, well, yeah, Bayern Munich took their Bundesliga title back, but that's only because Leverkusen focused on the Champions League, where they still beat Bayern, right? Over the course of 5 games, Leverkusen still beat Bayern. So they're still the better team. And that, I think, would haunt Bayern, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, so we'll have to see what happens, but it's obviously a huge game with huge ramifications, which will define both clubs' seasons, I guess, is in the job that both head coaches have done. But, Leverkusen, more or less full-strength team. Bayern, I think, should have Kimmich back for this game. And I'm trying to think who else is missing. Upamecano, I think, would back for this game as well. Fortunately, we should see both teams at more or less relative full strength. So I can't wait for it. I honestly can't wait.
I want them to see at full strength. I want them to go full power against one another for the full 180 minutes, maybe more. It might take more because there's no away goals, right? So I could see a world where it's 1-1 in the first and 2-2 in the second, and then we're getting more of it. And yeah, bring it. Like I want to see those two teams go full strength against one another. And I'm going as far as to kind of underline what we already said. I think the winner of this game can crown themselves German champion. Just let's forget the rest of the Bundesliga season. We'll just make this the playoff. The winner of this game.
Oh,
I can't
wait to see the Bayern fans in the comments after that.
They might win. They might win, and they would happily agree with it, right? Yeah, this is not going to take well. I think it's going to be a fantastic match. And maybe to put it even further, the winner of that game could go very deep in the Champions League as well. I think, maybe face Dortmund in the final. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, well, because Dortmund are obviously going to get to the final because that's Dortmund. But yeah,
that's totally what's going to happen. Yeah, anyways, I'm looking forward to what is going to be the 36th. I just looked this up.
I was going to say, I think they're in the same bracket. Do you know that?
Are they in the same bracket?
Let me quickly check.
They're not opposite from one another?
Let me see. Yeah, they're in the same bracket. So they would play each other in the semi. So Dortmund will play Bayern or Leverkusen in the semi-final.
Oh, there's no way Dortmund get past Leverkusen. I can see them squeeze past Barcelona, but for some odd reason I don't have the imagination to think they would go get past Leverkusen. For some odd reason I could see them do it against Bayern. That'd be just cruel. Anyways, everyone enjoy what is, and I looked this up. This is going to be the 36th and 37th German fixture in a UEFA Cup competition, and that includes all the East German ones, which there was actually a lot more than I thought. And that's because in the old like the old Champions League, the format, the one before that, the European Cup, they often got drawn against one another very early on. So this 36th and 37th time a German team will play a German team in a European competition, and I'm looking forward to it.